It was the darkest hour of the night when I stepped into the dimly lit Alzheimer's ward of the geriatric hospital. The stark, sterile scent of disinfectant clung to the air, and the corridor was eerily silent. I was used to the eerie calm of the night shift, but tonight, something felt different. My name is Sarah, a nurse tasked with caring for the elderly patients who wandered in the labyrinth of their own minds. They say that Alzheimer's patients see things, but I had never experienced anything out of the ordinary until that fateful night. As I made my rounds, I came upon Mr. Anderson, a frail man who had been living in the ward for years. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, his bony fingers trembling as he pointed towards the window. "There's a man in black," he croaked in a frail voice, his eyes wide with terror. I glanced out the window, but there was nothing there. "It's just your imagination, Mr. Anderson," I reassured him, though a shiver ran down my spine. I continued my rounds, dismissing the old man's ramblings as a symptom of his condition. But as I entered the corridor leading to room 217, an icy chill settled over me, and the overhead lights flickered ominously. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as I reached for the doorknob. Inside room 217, Mrs. Montgomery lay in bed, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. Her voice quivered as she spoke. "He's here, the man in black. He's waiting." I tried to calm her, but her terror was palpable. Her gaze remained fixed on the ceiling, and that's when I saw it, a shadowy figure, a man in black, lurking in the corner of the room. My breath caught in my throat as I stared, paralyzed by fear. The man in black was indistinct, like a wisp of smoke, but I could feel his malevolence. He beckoned to me, his presence radiating cold and darkness. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't leave Mrs. Montgomery alone with this sinister entity. With trembling hands, I reached for her bedside call button, and the shrill sound pierced the silence, summoning help. The man in black retreated into the shadows, disappearing as the lights returned to their steady glow. The hospital staff rushed in, but the man in black was gone. Mrs. Montgomery was inconsolable, and I was left traumatized and terrified. I couldn't explain what I had seen, and my colleagues could offer no comfort. In the days that followed, I researched the hospital's history and discovered a dark secret. The Alzheimer's ward was built on the site of an old cemetery, and the man in black matched the description of a malevolent spirit rumored to haunt the area. To this day, I can't shake the memory of that haunting night shift. I've since left the hospital, but I've learned that some things cannot be explained by science. The boundaries between our world and the supernatural are thin, and some encounters are best left alone. If you ever find yourself in a place where you sense an unnatural presence, my advice to you is simple. Never dismiss the experiences of others. Sometimes, the things that go bump in the night are all too real. It started on a sweltering summer night in South Florida. I'd been battling a terrible fever and splitting headache for days. But on that particular evening, my condition took a terrifying turn. The shadows in my room seemed to twist and contort, and eerie whispers echoed through the darkness. My heart raced, and I couldn't escape the feeling that something sinister lurked in the corners of my bedroom. Terrified, I stumbled out of bed and called 911. The ambulance rushed me to the nearest hospital, where I was immediately admitted for a battery of tests. The fluorescent lights overhead only intensified my hallucinations. The sterile walls seemed to close in on me, and I could hear faint, anguished cries in the distance. As the doctors worked to diagnose my condition, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Time lost all meaning, and the boundary between dreams and reality blurred. It was as if I had stepped into a nightmarish dimension. One night, in the throes of feverish delirium, I saw him, my ex-husband Richard, standing at the foot of my bed. His eyes were dark and empty, devoid of the love I once knew. I screamed for the nurses, but when they arrived, he was gone. They assured me it was just a hallucination, a side effect of the illness. but I knew better. Days turned into weeks, and my condition worsened. The hallucinations grew more vivid and sinister. I saw grotesque creatures lurking in the hospital's dimly lit corridors, and the whispers in the walls became more malicious. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making. One evening, as I lay in my hospital bed, Richard appeared once again, but this time he spoke. His voice was a chilling whisper. "You can never escape, my dear. We are bound together for eternity." I sobbed uncontrollably, but the nurses could offer no comfort. They began to look at me with suspicion, as if they believed I was losing my mind. I was trapped, not only in my own deteriorating body, but also in a web of hallucinations that refused to release their grip. Then, on a moonless night, something extraordinary happened. A nurse named Emily whispered in my ear, "Follow me if you want to escape this nightmare." She had the same darkness in her eyes that Richard had possessed, but there was a glimmer of hope hidden within. With trembling legs, I followed Emily through the labyrinthine hospital corridors. The air grew colder, and the whispers of despair grew louder. At last, we arrived at an old, disused room, a place forgotten by time. Emily revealed the truth. She had been a patient in the hospital for years, trapped in a similar hallucinatory nightmare. She had found a way to navigate the blurred boundary between dreams and reality. She explained that we had to confront our deepest fears to break free. With her guidance, we faced our tormentors, our darkest nightmares. The shadows writhed and shrieked, but we stood our ground. Slowly, the hallucinations began to wane. Finally, the line between dreams and reality began to solidify, and the fever broke. I was released from the hospital, but Emily chose to stay behind to help others like me. As I walked out into the warm Florida sunshine, I couldn't help but wonder if the nightmares were truly over. Was I free? Or was this just another layer of the hallucination? The only advice I can offer is this: sometimes the greatest horrors lurk within our own minds. Confront them, or they may consume you whole. It was a crisp autumn evening when Sarah and I decided to embark on an unconventional first date. Our sense of adventure led us to an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town, a place shrouded in chilling tales of past horrors. We thought we could handle the eerie atmosphere, but we had no idea what we were getting into. The asylum loomed before us, its Gothic architecture casting ominous shadows in the dimming light. The rusty gates creaked open, and we stepped into a world frozen in time. Our flashlights flickered as we ventured deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, their peeling wallpaper and crumbling walls creating an eerie ambiance. The air grew colder, and we could feel an unsettling presence. Sarah clutched my arm, her breaths quickening. I reassured her, even as my own heart raced. As we turned a corner, our flashlights illuminated a long-forgotten padded cell, its metal door hanging ajar. It was as though the tormented souls of the past were watching us. A distant whisper echoed through the darkness, causing us to freeze. "Who's there?" I called out. But the only response was the faint drip of water and our own racing heartbeats. We pressed on, our trepidation growing with every step. As we descended into the basement, the temperature dropped further, and a sinister feeling enveloped us. The sound of footsteps echoed from behind, and we spun around, our flashlights trembling. But there was nothing, just the oppressive darkness. Suddenly, a door slammed shut in the distance, and we heard a chilling, guttural laugh. Panic set in, and we sprinted through the winding hallways. We had unknowingly become pawns in a malevolent game. Sarah and I stumbled upon a small, forgotten chapel within the asylum. Its altar was adorned with tattered, moth-eaten hymnals. In the pews, we found an old photograph. It depicted a group of doctors and nurses from the asylum's past, their eyes hollow and expressions haunted. We couldn't escape the feeling that they were still here, trapped in a nightmare. We heard the sinister laugh again, this time closer, as if the malevolent presence was toying with us. Fear and desperation drove us to an open door that led to the asylum's courtyard. We raced outside, gasping for breath, and slammed the door shut behind us. The moment of relief was brief. We turned to see a gaunt figure standing in the courtyard, bathed in the pale moonlight. It was the ominous stranger who had tormented us. His eyes gleamed with madness, and he took a step towards us, his voice a sinister whisper. "Welcome to my domain," he hissed. Panic surged through our veins, but we knew there was no way back. We had to face whatever terror awaited us. In the end, we escaped the clutches of the sinister stranger, but the asylum's chilling legacy haunted us long after. That terrifying night forged an unbreakable bond between us, a connection born of fear and survival. Now, as we share our story with you, dear listener, we offer this advice. Never underestimate the darkness that lies within abandoned asylums, and be cautious when venturing into the unknown. Sometimes, the scariest experiences can bring people closer together, but they can also leave scars that never truly fade.